This is the floodplain country of northern Australia. Kakadu, the Kimberley, Cape York. Wet season, when the rivers spill into a maze of shallow billabongs and the air is so thick with insects you can practically chew it. This is where the saltwater crocodile rules. The largest reptile on Earth. Up to 7 meters long. Over a ton. A bite force that can crush a car door. For 200 million years, nothing in these waters has been able to touch them. And yet the babies keep vanishing. Researchers walking nest sites across northern Queensland have been finding the same thing for years. Nests dug up. Eggs smashed and eaten. Hatchlings gone before they ever reach the water. In some sites on Cape York Peninsula, the nest failure rate hit 100%. Not most nests. Every single one. Several seasons in a row. Scientists set up cameras. They sent rangers out at dawn. They tried to find what was doing this to an animal that had survived every mass extinction for the last 200 million years. And what they found at the nest sites at night was not what anyone predicted. But before we get there, we need to understand what makes this story strange in the first place. Because the saltwater crocodile is supposed to be a conservation success story. One of the greatest wildlife recoveries in Australian history. Go back to the 1940s. Commercial hunters were killing saltwater crocodiles across the top end for their belly skins, which made some of the finest leather in the world. By the 1960s, they had been so efficient at it that the crocodiles were disappearing river by river. By 1971, when the Northern Territory finally banned hunting, researchers estimated fewer than 3,000 saltwater crocodiles remained in the entire territory. The original population before hunting had been close to 100,000. That's a 97% collapse in under 3 decades. Then the law changed, and something remarkable happened. Crocodile numbers started climbing. Slowly at first, then faster. By the early 1980s, the population was back to 30,000. By the late 1990s, 80,000. Today, the best estimates put the saltwater crocodile population across northern Australia at somewhere between 100,000 and 150,000. From near extinction to a population pressing against the limits of what the habitat can hold. The recovery became a textbook case. Other countries pointed to it. Conservation organizations cited it. The saltwater crocodile became proof that if you just stop killing an animal, nature will take care of the rest. So when researchers started finding shattered nests and empty hatching sites across Cape York in the 2000s, the question was obvious. Something had changed. The crocodiles were recovering as adults. But the babies were not making it. And without hatchlings, there is no next generation. The recovery could stall, or reverse, entirely silently. Now here's the thing that makes a saltwater crocodile nest so hard to defend. The female lays 40 to 60 eggs in a mound of vegetation and soil on a riverbank. She guards that mound for the full 90-day incubation period. She sleeps near it. She chases away rivals. She is, by any measure, an attentive parent for a reptile. But she has to eat. She has to leave occasionally. And 90 days is a long time. Long enough for a predator to learn the location of a nest, wait out the mother's absence, and move in. A crocodile hatchling weighs about 70 grams and is roughly 30 centimeters long. It breaks out of the egg by cutting through the shell with a small tooth on the tip of its snout. It calls out to its mother with a high-pitched squawking. She hears it, digs it out, and carries it to the water in her jaws. For the next few months, she guards the creche of hatchlings in shallow water near the bank. And then the odds turn brutal. Less than 1% of saltwater crocodile hatchlings survive to adulthood. 99 out of every 100 born will be eaten before they grow large enough for nobody to want to eat them. That is not a conservation crisis. That is normal crocodile biology. The population sustains itself because the adults live so long and females breed every single year. As long as enough babies get through, the numbers hold. When they don't, everything downstream fails. So researchers needed to find what was intercepting the eggs before the mother could even get them to the water. The obvious answer was monitor lizards. In Australia, they're called goannas. There are dozens of species, but the one that lives in the same habitat as saltwater crocodiles, the yellow-spotted monitor, Varanus panoptes, can grow to nearly 2 meters long and is one of the most effective nest raiders in the world. Goannas have been documented destroying crocodile nests across northern Australia for decades. They locate the mound by smell, dig through the surface layer, and methodically eat every egg inside. In some river systems, researchers working before the 2000s had already documented goannas hitting more than 90% of crocodile nests at certain sites. 90%. That meant that in some locations, for every 10 nests a female crocodile built and guarded for 3 months, 9 of them were being completely emptied by monitor lizards before a single egg could hatch. So the story seemed to write itself. Goannas were the villain. They had always been the villain. People had been pointing at goannas for years. All you had to do was manage the goanna population, protect the nests, and the baby crocodiles would come back. Simple. Satisfying. Wrong. Because around the same time researchers were building the case against monitor lizards, something else arrived in the rivers of northern Australia. And it changed everything, in ways nobody had budgeted for. To understand what happened, you need to know about the cane toad. Cane toads were brought to Australia from South America in 1935 to control beetles in Queensland's sugarcane fields. The plan failed completely. The toads ignored the beetles and bred explosively instead. They spread westward across the continent at a rate of up to 60 kilometres a year, eventually reaching the Northern Territory and pushing deep into the Kimberley. Today they cover an enormous swathe of northern Australia, and there is effectively no way to stop them. The cane toad is toxic. Its parotoid glands behind its eyes produce a potent poison that it delivers to anything that tries to swallow it. Most Australian predators had never encountered a toad before. They had no instinct to avoid it, no physiological resistance to the poison. And the result, as the toad front moved west, was a wave of death among the animals that tried to eat them. Goannas were among the hardest hit. Monitor lizards across the toad invasion front crashed precipitously. At some sites, populations of yellow-spotted monitors collapsed by more than 90% within a few years of toad arrival. A 2021 study tracking monitors across the entire invasion trajectory found that populations of Varanus panoptes, the specific goanna most likely to raid crocodile nests, showed dramatic collapses with essentially no recovery at most sites even decades after the toads arrived. So the cane toad killed off most of the goannas. And here is where it gets genuinely strange. At McKinley River in the Northern Territory, researchers had documented that over 90% of freshwater crocodile nests were being raided by monitor lizards before the toads arrived. After the toads moved in and the goanna population collapsed, researchers went back to count hatchlings. What they found across 7 monitoring sites was a 342% increase in crocodile recruitment. The thing that had been destroying nearly every nest was now mostly gone. And baby crocodile numbers exploded in response. A toxic invasive species had accidentally protected the crocodile nursery by wiping out the crocodile's main nest predator. That is not a conservation plan. That is an ecological accident. And it was one of the clues that pointed researchers toward what was really happening on Cape York, where the cane toad hadn't yet arrived in significant numbers, and where the baby crocodiles were still disappearing. The cameras went in at the nest sites in Queensland. The rangers watched the footage. And what came out of the darkness to destroy the nests was not a goanna. It had a snout. It had hooves. It grunted and rooted through the mound with the methodical efficiency of an animal that had learned exactly where the eggs were and how to get to them. It was a feral pig. Sus escrofa. The domestic pig, gone wild. Brought to Australia by European settlers, escaped from farms and spreading for over 200 years through virtually every habitat on the continent. Australia now has somewhere between 24 million and 30 million feral pigs, one of the largest populations of feral pigs on Earth. They cause more than $100 million in agricultural damage every year. They destroy wetlands by churning through the mud with their snouts. They spread disease. They eat almost anything. And across Queensland's Cape York Peninsula, researchers confirmed in 2013 that feral pigs had become the primary nest predator for saltwater crocodiles. Not goannas. Pigs. But the scale of what pigs were doing to eggs in the region had already been documented through another lens, and it was staggering. Letnick and colleagues documented mass mortality events of freshwater crocodiles at the Victoria River after the toad front moved through. 77% population decline at some sites within a single year. The toad giveth and the toad taketh away. Which meant that any conservation effort that tried to manage the goanna problem without simultaneously accounting for the cane toad was potentially making things worse. Bring the goannas back with removing the toads, and you hand the toads a larger native predator community to poison. Remove the toads without restoring the goannas, and you have no native nest predator to balance the crocodile population. The pieces don't move independently. They move together, and pulling one thread tightens every knot in the web. Researchers at the University of Western Australia developed a strategy called conditioned taste aversion, training monitor lizards to avoid eating cane toads by exposing them to a small, sublethal dose of toad toxin. A goanna that gets slightly sick from a toad sausage learns never to eat another toad. The method worked in controlled trials. It opened a pathway toward restoring the monitor lizard population in toad-invaded territory without the mass death that natural toad encounter caused. But it required capturing, training, and releasing individual lizards across enormous stretches of remote terrain. It is not a switch you flip. Meanwhile, the feral pig problem had its own answer, and it's surprisingly effective when applied precisely. On Cape York, indigenous rangers working with CSIRO researchers tried a targeted pig control approach around specific turtle nesting beaches. Instead of running large-scale aerial culls that killed thousands of pigs indiscriminately across wide areas, they focused bait stations on a 10-kilometer corridor directly adjacent to the nesting sites in the weeks before nesting season. The result? Predation on turtle nests dropped by 90% within a single week. In December 2022, Queensland Parks and Wildlife removed over 2,000 feral pigs from Cape York National Parks in just 4 days using helicopter-based control. Nest success in those protected areas climbed sharply. The same approach, applied to crocodile nesting habitat, showed the same directional result. Protect the specific stretch of riverbank where females nest. Target the pigs at the right time. The nests survive. It is not glamorous. There is no ancient biology in it. It is pigs shooting from a helicopter and bait stations near the water. But the nests make it to hatching. So where does that leave the saltwater crocodile? The adult population is not collapsing. The 150,000 crocodiles across northern Australia are not going anywhere. They are large enough, old enough, and territorial enough to hold their position in the ecosystem. But the pipeline matters. A population of 150,000 crocodiles that stops replacing itself will eventually age into decline. The adults that exist today will die over the coming decades. If the hatchlings don't come through, the numbers will slide downward, slowly at first, then faster, and the slide will be invisible until it isn't. The irony running through all of this is that the greatest threat to the saltwater crocodile's next generation is not hunting. It is not climate change. It is not the ancient reptilian predators that have coexisted with crocodiles for millions of years. It is 2 introduced species, a European pig and a South American toad, that arrived on this continent within the last 200 years and have been rewiring the food web ever since. The goanna was the answer everyone expected. The monitor lizard, the native nest raider, the ancient reptilian enemy that had been opening crocodile mounds since before humans arrived on the continent. Scientists had documented it. Decades of records showed it happening. The story was clean and logical. Native predator meets native prey, push back the predator, protect the prey. But biology doesn't write clean stories. It writes interdependent ones. The feral pig came in and outcompeted the goanna at the nest site in Queensland without anyone designing that outcome. The cane toad came in and poisoned the goanna into near extinction in the Northern Territory without anyone planning that outcome either. And between those 2 accidental forces, the baby crocodile's chances of making it from egg to water, already at less than 1%, got pushed even lower in some places and accidentally improved in others. The management response that's actually working is not built around a single intervention. It is helicopter patrols over nesting beaches before pig season. It is targeted bait stations on the riverbanks. It is taste aversion trials with captive goannas. It is monitoring teams walking transects in the pre-dawn dark, counting nests and checking which ones made it through the night. It is relentlessly specific, unglamorous, expensive work, and it is the only thing standing between one of the world's greatest conservation recoveries and the next chapter nobody wants to write. The saltwater crocodile survived the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. It survived 26 years of commercial hunting that knocked it down to 3,000. It survived every drought, flood, and ecological upheaval this continent has thrown at it for 200 million years. Whether it can survive a feral pig with a good sense of smell is still being written. The cameras are still running on the riverbanks. The rangers are still going out before dawn. And somewhere in the mud of a flooded Cape York floodplain, a female crocodile is lying on her mound of vegetation, waiting out the 90-day shift, listening for the sounds that mean her eggs survive the night.